woke up today in the hospital. Came home, that's all I know.
The fight's over. You gotta let it go. I know it's hard. After it's kept you warm and fed, alive.
You don't know what we've had to go through out there. Things we've had to do. I bet you got to do some of those same things yourself, am I right?
In 2021, I was introduced to the show The Walking Dead, along with the infamous main character Rick Grimes. With this series, I had originally planned to watch casually now and again, not aware of its detailed storyline and major fanbase. Rick Grimes appealed to me throughout the story as a character because of his sheer ability to adapt to every situation presented to him in each season, and how these situations ultimately led to his change. From officer friendly in season 1, to the violent man who will stop at nothing to get home to his family. Without further ado, let's discuss the change of Rick Grimes. From the very beginning of the series, we are introduced to our main protagonist, Rick Grimes, alongside his best friend and partner, Shane Walsh. From a viewer's standpoint, we acknowledge what kind of man Rick is, and how his wife has little respect for him. He talks with Shane about expressing himself and his emotions. This is then interrupted and followed up by showing Rick and Shane take down criminals who had been involved in a high-speed chase. After everything seems in the clear, he is shot in the back and Shane fights to keep Rick alive. This is what changed everything for Rick, and what gave us the story we all know and love. Something which stood out to me from the beginning to the end of Rick's story is the significance of the hospital. We see fleeting images of Shane visiting Rick, followed by Rick waking up moments later only to realise he has been in a coma for months. Rick Grimes became a man in the later seasons who could adapt to most situations presented to him. But unlike some characters who were made for the apocalypse, I believe that Rick was a man who could have easily died in those earlier seasons if it wasn't for the people he had around him, especially Laurie and Carl. Family is a major theme in The Walking Dead, and is ultimately what changes Rick Grimes into the violent protective animal we later see him as. Rick views his group as his family, and he will stop at nothing at protecting what is his and the people he loves. A scene which stuck with me in the pilot episode is when Rick is at his lowest, believing his wife and child are dead. He makes his way into his old home with the hopes of finding anything to do with Carl or Laurie, but breaks down at the idea of them gone. He questions his reality, if he's dreaming or if he's already dead. He begins to believe he has no reason to continue, until we are introduced to another major character named Morgan. In the later seasons, Morgan was a moral compass for Rick, trying his best to direct Rick on making the right decisions. Upon meeting Morgan and his son Dwayne, they patch Rick up and discuss the situation at hand. After Rick discovers his photo albums and pictures have been taken, new hopes arise in him. This is the start of Rick Grimes' journey and his eventual change. He knows his family is alive and he will stop at nothing to finding them. Even in the early days, leadership came easily to Rick due to being a deputy sheriff. An infamous scene we all know and love is the scene with Rick stuck in the tank, surrounded by walkers, and with no hopes of escaping, until he is rescued by Glenn, a major character who also acts as a moral compass for Rick in later seasons, advising him to make the right choices for the good of the group. Shortly after Rick and Glenn escape the horde of walkers, he is introduced to new survivors: Andrea, Morales, T-Dog, and of course, Merle. Within a short period, Rick has already taken control of the situation, arresting Merle and leaving him to die after he assaults T-Dog. I believe these events are crucial to Rick Grimes as a character, because of the people he had met and how each of them influenced him as a person later on in the series. In the early seasons, I believe what really changed Rick Grimes was Laurie cheating on him with Shane, as she believed him to be dead. We see this during season 1 in the Atlanta camp, with no emotion whatsoever toward her believed to be dead husband, Rick. Rick Grimes suffered his betrayal numerous times through these seasons, but the idea of his best friend betraying him, as well as his wife, so early on, was a major catalyst in the change of Rick Grimes. Rick eventually finds his family, along with Shane and the rest of the group of survivors who escaped Atlanta. Little did we know the journey this group is about to face. Something which interested me is a scene with Daryl Dixon and Rick once Jim gets bit. Daryl quickly makes the judgment to kill him, but Rick tells him,
Hey! We don't kill the living.
This statement alone demonstrates just how much Rick changes in later seasons, all in the name of protecting his family. I believe Rick is a selfless man when it comes to his people. He does what he thinks is best, not for him, but for a better future for his own. This is something that does not change in each season. The ending of season 1 left us with a chilling scene in the CDC with Dr. Jenner. As Rick thanks him and tells him he is grateful, he tells Rick that the day will come when he won't be, and whispers to him that everyone is infected. Once Rick discovers this, he could have easily given up. Why fight to survive when it is delaying the inevitable? But he keeps going for the good of his family. In season 2, Rick makes numerous decisions which conflict inside him from right and wrong. In the opening episodes of season 2, Sophia disappears when Rick distracts walkers away from her, sending him on a frenzy to find her as he bears the guilt of her possibly being dead. He allows Carl to approach a deer, which then gets shot and takes Carl down, almost killing him. Rick is conflicted through season 2 and struggles to make the right choices for the good of his family. In the opening episodes, we are shown a scene with Rick in church, talking to a statue of Jesus, asking for a sign that he is doing the right thing. Rick is beginning to understand that the new world requires drastic actions in order to survive, and his guilt begins to slowly tear him up. A scene which stood out to me was the Nebraska scene. Rick and Glenn try to find Herschel in a bar, when they are approached by two men who try to coax their way into finding where their camp is. Rick takes control of the situation and kills the two men. This was a cold and sudden move by him, and was justified, but it shows a significant change which has taken place within Rick, the man who once said we don't kill the living. Tensions also rise between Shane and Rick once he finds out about his best friend and his wife being together. This reaches a boiling point when an argument breaks out over the decision of killing Randall. Rick and Shane are out to kill each other, and Rick knows that Shane may be gone too far gone. The scene which follows the lone walker with Shane and Rick in the car is one of the best scenes in the series in my opinion. I'd like to believe that Shane knew his days were numbered. He was an outsider who felt like he didn't belong. He knew if he couldn't be the one to protect Laurie and Carol, he would have to make Rick become the man who could. The ending of season 2 in the field, with Shane and Rick, could be interpreted in many ways. Shane was the one who made Rick realise the actions he needed to take in order to keep his family alive, and not everything could be solved with peace. Shane may have lost his mind after leaving Otis to die, but I'd like to believe he accepted his fate in the end, and understood the monster he became had to be put down. The ending scene after the farm has been overrun with walkers, Rick announces to the group that he killed his best friend for them and that is no longer a democracy within the group. Shane was killed, but I believe the Rick Grimes who he once knew also died in that field. Murder changes a man, and Rick killed one of his closest friends just to survive. In the opening episodes of Season 3 and 4, we are shown two different sides to Rick Grimes. In Season 3, we see a cold and calculated Rick Grimes, whose only motive is to find a safe place for Laurie and the new baby. I believe that after Shane, Rick's forgiveness and trust became harder to earn, especially from Laurie. In the short time she is seen in Season 3, Rick has shut her out completely, and Laurie acknowledges her failures and how it was a changed man she once knew. Rick has new responsibilities now. He has taken the entire group under his wing, and he will do whatever he can for their survival. In the third season, we're introduced to the new antagonist, which is the Governor, who is the leader of a community named Woodbury. We soon learn that Andrea is the key that connects Rick and the Governor in Season 3, and is ultimately the reason for their ongoing feud leading into Season 4. The Governor was Rick's first encounter with pure evil, and I truly believe it was Herschel that set Rick straight to deal with this new threat. A scene which marked itself a major catalyst for the change of Rick Grimes was the death of Laurie and the birth of Juliet, his newborn child. He again is conflicted with grief and regret, as well as guilt for not being the father his daughter needs. Juliet was the group's light in the darkness while in the prison. We see Rick begin to lose his mind shortly after Laurie's death and hallucinate her in the prison. There are also quite a few callbacks to previous characters during this time. During the assault on Woodbury, in an attempt to rescue Glenn and Maggie, Rick sees Shane during a shootout on the street through the smoke. Season 3 was the change that Shane preached to Rick in the second season about. It isn't like it was before, and it is the survival of the fittest. Rick kills the prisoner without second thoughts after he intentionally pushes him towards the walkers. The Governor murders a group of soldiers in cold blood, just to steal their belongings. Rick acknowledges it is kill or be killed, and he begins to have this approach. In the finale for Season 3, we see the Governor breach the fences of the prison to take down Rick and the group, only to be baited into a trap. This was our first finale as viewers seeing Rick and the group have the upper hand and be able to defend their home. The ending scene with the Governor killing his own people for speaking out of line was bone-chilling, and set it up nicely for what we could expect in the next season. In the opening episodes of the fourth season, we now see a different Rick Grimes as he is adjusted to being a farmer along with Carl and Herschel. He has put the gun away and left it behind to have a better influence on his son and his group. Carl shot a boy in Season 3, and I believe he began to develop traits of Rick. We see that Rick has taken in the people from Woodbury and life is sustaining within the prison walls. We are introduced to new characters that will play big roles in our group, such as Sasha, Tyrese, Bob, and more. This was a major change from the rootless cold man we'd seen take shape in the previous season, and we begin to see Rick's humanity shine through once again, still knowing of what he is capable of. Midway through Season 4, we were also brought back to the Governor, now alone and broken after all the destruction he left in his path. We see Woodbury up in flames, and for a brief moment we were led to believe he could be redeemed until he is reunited with Martinez. I enjoyed Season 4 for the most part, as the contrast between the beginning and the end feel like two separate seasons completely. In the beginning, we see a man who has put down his gun to be a better father to his kids. In the finale, we see a vicious animal who takes a chunk out of a person's throat and finds himself along with the group, held against their will by cannibals. The changes this season presented to us was unmatched, and I personally believe Season 4 was underrated compared to other seasons. The death which was instrumental in the change of Rick Grimes was of Herschel. This was the man who could guide Rick when he was on the wrong path. The man who acted as a father figure to Rick and the group. the man who could have left Rick at his lowest for the sake of his family, but kept him in check. After Herschel died by the hands of the governor, Rick became a different man completely. He's the most dangerous he has ever been so far in the series, and the ideals of not killing the living have been long forgotten. Rick Grimes is not an evil man, but a man who has adapted to the severity of each situation and let it shape him into an entity of its own. During the Terminus arc, we were presented with a new kind of evil. Gareth, the leader of these cannibals, presents a nonchalant and laid-back personality when the group first arrives in Terminus. In this situation, Rick almost welcomes the challenge, as he states another fan-favourite quote.
They're fucking with the wrong people.
Carol has also seen major changes throughout the Walking Dead series, and honestly deserves a video of her own. Blowing up the gas tank with the zombie guts over her was another iconic scene that made Season 4 and 5 that much better. I believe Terminus made Rick more numb to the fact that these inhumane acts are now the norm, and that he needs to get used to it. What I enjoyed was a scene in Father Gabriel's church, when Rick fulfills his promise and kills Garrett with the machete with the red handle. We can almost see the pleasure he took in his face killing the Terminus people. Severe trauma and drastic actions cause Rick to return to a more primitive state where the main objective is to survive along with his newfound family. In the first half through Season 5, Rick and the group are on the road and are on the bare minimum of supplies, food, water and the will to live. We also saw the loss of Beth and Bob, along with Tyrese, which we see the effect it has on Sasha and Maggie during these episodes. A scene which always stood out to me and I believe went under the radar was a conversation between Rick and Michonne on letting go of the past, and although fighting has kept them warm and fed, it's time to move on before it takes over completely. The introduction of Alexandria was a new changing point in Rick Grimes' journey. After weeks of living like animals, they are introduced to a community which operates similar to the old world they once knew. Led by a woman named Deanna, Rick and the group are escorted in and interviewed separately. During this interview with Rick, we see the paranoia and agitation he feels in a new environment. Deanna reacts as she would with a wild cat, as Rick is unpredictable at this point. The Alexandria arc was a turning point for the entire series, as this would be the community the group would spend most of their days in. Rick is appointed as the town's constable along with Michonne, and shaves his infamous beard. This was interesting to see though. Deanna believes that Rick would return to the man he once was before the fall, but in reality Rick is already a changed man from years of seeing death and experiencing major trauma. Instantly Rick, Carol and Daryl begin making arrangements of their own, if things don't work out. Another interesting storyline which presented itself was the story with Jesse and Pete. Jesse had been in an abusive relationship and Rick picked this up as well as Carol. Many viewers pointed out the similarities between Shane and Rick during the point in the story, as Shane did with Laurie. Although Pete's death was justified for what he was doing to Jesse, I believe Rick had other intentions. These parallels are also shown during Rick's speech in the street, shouting at Deanna with a gun and denouncing her ways as a leader, similar to what Shane did to Rick once he found the Volkers in the barn. In the Season 5 finale, we see the impact Rick has had on his group as they all say their piece to defend Rick. The loyalty shown between these people was incredible writing. Deanna is finally hit with a reality check as her husband is accidentally killed by Pete, and she now realises that Rick was right. Rick coldly kills Pete and takes over Alexandria. During Season 6 and 7, events take a major turn with the introduction of Negan and the Saviours. At this point in the story, Rick is at his most confident and believes he and the group are an unstoppable force. Morgan, who had been introduced in the pilot episode, makes his return and is now in Alexandria with Rick and the group. Morgan could be considered another moral compass for Rick, as I stated earlier, as when the idea comes about to attack the satellite station, Morgan disagrees and understands it's a bad move. Over the seasons, Rick has always seemed to make the right decisions, but they've been made altered due to his experiences. Herschel would have been an interesting character during the Saviour War though. Although he now understood what the world was, he was morally correct in his actions and decisions. Attacking the Saviours in the satellite station sealed their fate forever and made the viewers question Rick's judgment. One could argue it was only a matter of time before the Saviours came to Alexandria. We see this when Carol has met with them on the road, and they tell her they were just on their way down there. From the over-paranoid man we saw at the beginning of Season 5, to the cocky, overconfident man we saw in Season 6, was another significant change in character. One of my favourite scenes in the series is when the group are rushing to the hilltop to save Maggie, and they are met with saviour blockades in each road they take. Rick is first led to believe they are a small group but slowly learns that he's dealing with a different enemy completely. This is not like the Governor, or Terminus, the Claimers or the Wolves. This is an army of dangerous people who heavily outnumber Rick and the group. The introduction of Negan was incredibly made, and Jeffrey Dean Morgan could not have played the role any better. The group running through the forest only to be surrounded by whistles and hundreds of saviours was terrifying. For the first time we are scared of the living rather than the dead in a series about zombies. During this sequence, Rick now understands what Dr. Jenner meant all those seasons ago when he told him the day will come when he won't be. The characters we've grown to love, all the things we've seen them go through together, could now be at an end. The death of Abraham and Glenn was definitely something I hadn't anticipated and truly changed, not only Rick Grimes but the entire series as a whole. Glenn had a baby on the way, and Abraham could have had a potential relationship with Sasha. We are shown a quick scene of what could have been with the family around the table in Alexandria. This was the turning point for Rick Grimes. The confident, cocky leader had been broken down and became Negan's pet in minutes. So far, Rick has always held some control in every situation he found himself in except now. He's lost and can only do what Negan says in order to keep everyone else alive. In conclusion, Rick's decision influenced the changes we saw throughout the series. He is not an evil man, or selfish, and cares deeply for the ones he calls family. But some of his actions could be morally questioned and could have been done differently. I'm really interested to see where the spin-off takes us next year and what the CRM want with Rick. The fact that certain choices have led a small town deputy sheriff to a government-run military is great storytelling, and I believe he was one of the most interesting changes in TV history. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Art to Change, guys. Please leave a like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments what you think about Rick Grimes, and let me know your kind of thoughts on his personal changes and what I could have done differently or what I could have said differently. I know I didn't really discuss Season 8 and 9 and the ending episode of 11. I mean, I could have discussed really about Carl's death and how that could have impacted Rick, but I do believe that after Negan's death, I believe that Rick was already a set man. He really didn't. There wasn't really any more changes to be made. I think the one final change was after Carl's promise and his vision for the future, which definitely kind of influenced Rick's vision. But I think the major changes really happened between 1 and 7. That's when we saw the major changes in the character. But I hope you enjoy though. Keep your notifications on for updates on what's to come, the next character analysis, the next Art of Change episode. There will be a lot of edits coming after the new year. I've got some big plans, but thanks for watching, guys. Please leave a like and subscribe.